Huh?
We are on. Hello,
All right, let's do it.
everyone. Yes, absolutely. I want to introduce you to this legendary salesperson, Mr. Ben Gay the Third. He's been personally trained by fellow greats such as Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar, uh, Earl Nightingale, and other sales giants. Amazing. And he's also the author of The Closers, which is the very foundations of professional selling. I want to introduce to you one more time, Mr. Ben Gay the Third. How you feeling today, Ben?
I'm doing well. In fact, funny you should ask. Gigi and I just got our second shots, flu shots. So if I should pass out in the middle of this interview, that's the reason. It's one of the after effects.
That's funny because I just got mine yesterday also,
Excellent.
and I was expecting maybe there'd be some side effects, but it really wasn't that bad. I kind of rested, took it easy, and today I just feel great. I'm glad that it's out the way.
Yeah, me too. It's crossed off my calendar, and I'm a little anal about things like that. So the exciting thing to me was getting to cross it off
Yes.
and be done with it. But last time I felt a little sleepy, maybe, because I can lie
Hmm.
down and take a nap anywhere. So maybe that was it. This time, nothing yet, but
Good.
glad to have it behind us. I'm glad you do too.
Yeah, we can move on now. So let me ask you, how long have you been in the sales game again?
Well, it depends on when you start counting. I've been in the serious sales game making a good deal of money for 55 years.
Amazing.
Uh, if you go back to owning my lawn mowing business and so on when I was 14, then we go back 60 some odd years, 65
Ooh,
years. So I'm 78 today, and it's all I've ever done. So
wow.
it just, at what point do you want to start counting? We started making
Wow.
really good money in 1965.
So that's just who you are. You're just a born salesperson. So it was in your
Well,
DNA.
born, trained, etc. But I don't have the reason I answered the ad and joined Holiday Magic Cosmetics was I need to make more money. I was putting my wife through nursing school, and so I bought the Atlanta Journal Constitution out of a magazine rack and started going through the help wanteds. And I don't think there were any Z's, but I went through all the letters they had, and I wasn't qualified to do anything. No one just said salesperson. So
Yes.
I just as I was about to throw the newspaper in the trash can, I looked at the next section. It was business opportunities. And I looked at that, and a little ad said, if you know anything about marketing plans, want to make more money, dial this number. Well, I want to make more money. That's the reason I was looking in the paper. But I literally wasn't qualified to do anything. They didn't teach boys how to type and do stuff like that back then. That was a girls' sport. And so I couldn't be a secretary. I probably could have been a receptionist, but they wanted female voices and so on. So people say, why'd you get in selling? A, I knew nothing else. And B, desperation. I needed money.
And it worked out well for you. I want to get to
Yeah, it
know
did.
you a little bit more. And I want to ask you, so where do you live? And I understand that you are married. And tell us about your kids.
Well, I'm married to Gigi. We've been known each other for almost 50 years, been
Hmm.
married for almost 30 years. And we live in the little town of Placerville, California. Everybody says Placerville when they read it, but it's Placerville. It's where gold was discovered. The first nugget was picked up 7 miles from where I'm
Hmm.
sitting right now. And Placerville was sort of the financial hub of all that activity down by the river. And that's where we live now and where I've been. I have four sons, had one, Ben the fourth, lives in Georgia. The second one, Josh, was killed on the way up to go snowboarding. And our youngest boy wonders why I get concerned. I say, now drive carefully. And so he says, yeah, what could happen? Well, what could happen was the second son was killed. So that's
Hmm.
two. Then we adopted a son. I think I told you about him the last time we talked. Lamont Bowens, who came
Mm-hmm.
to a class I taught in prison and just asked me for a referral letter. He's up for a judgeship, believe it or not.
Amazing.
Been a
Amazing.
been a successful practicing attorney for I guess about 10 years now. And then our fourth son, Gigi's biological son, Antonio, is a computer wizard, and he's the one who programs the locks in the hotel room you check into so that you can't get in your room, for your waving the card or looking in the peephole. More than once while trying to open a hotel door, I've called him wherever he was. Chicago, I remember one time. But I call him and say, all right, here's the deal. I'm standing outside this, he's wave your
Wow.
card rapidly in front of the thing, oh, and there's no place to stick it in. We don't stick them in anymore. Wave it rapidly.
Ah,
And the last time was look in the little dot, and it read my iris. I wondered why down at the hotel desk they had asked me to look in the little dot. They didn't tell me I'd need that information later. So he does that and does training. He said he never wanted to be a public speaker, but he loves to stand in front of the room and tell the people what he's done to their hotel and how they can work with it and so on. So he's a public speaker and doesn't even know it.
fantastic. That's wonderful. I wanted to jump into sales because I was reading something that you wrote that was a wonderful statistic. You closed 86%. You have an 86% close rate. That is
Yeah,
astounding.
and that's a
Um,
serious sales, not you phone in to order a book and I happen to take the call.
right.
But if you're being sold on hiring me to do a seminar or a large quantity of something, yeah, 86%, and I can't get it up. I don't know why, but
I think that's
yeah,
pretty darn good.
well, it is. But I got to 86% like 25 years ago, and so I keep trying to bump it. And some months it's up a little bit, and some months it's down a little bit. But 86% is pretty good, which means somebody asked me the other day, I'm having trouble dealing with rejection. And I said, well,
Hmm. Hmm.
I figure I've made just about, not counting group sales where I'm talking to thousands of people, but one-on-one on the computer, in person, on the phone, I've made about 100,000 sales presentations. And I have an 86% closing rate. That's the good news. The bad news is that means 14,000 people listened to the fantastic Ben Gay presentation and said, no, thank you. So,
Yes.
how do you deal
Yes.
with rejection? Next, do the best you
Yes.
can,
Mhm.
get good at what you do, and then next. And the other thing, Rosalind, I don't fire, like, picture a person out bird hunting. The covey takes off and they fire the shotgun and they say, I got 10 birds today. Well, 10 birds ran into your little BBs. You didn't get through skill any one of them. It was a blast of pellets and a blast of birds converged. I'm more like a sniper, and I have friends in the military who were in the military who were snipers. I can sit in a tree for 2 days and not blink. But when I ask you a closing question, I already know the answer, or I wouldn't have asked you.
Mm, mm, mm,
So
mm.
there's a difference between it being a quail hunter and a sniper. I'm a sniper.
Wow. Wow. That puts it in perspective. So that means that you're calculated. That means that you've observed, and you must have an awful good sense of intuition to know when to pull that shot, to pull that trigger.
Yeah. And what it is, the confidence comes from, this isn't my first rodeo. This is the first time
Mhm.
you may have looked at this product or service or considered hiring me or whatever, but it's not my first time. There were roughly 86,000 people before you. So I
Yeah.
sort of know where we're going. It's like being a sheepdog. I know where the sheep are going to wind up, and I know how to get the stragglers and put them back in line without ever laying a hand on them. But I know how to herd it along. And when you decide to buy, people, J. Douglas Edwards was asked once, how do you develop a closing instinct? And he said, by closing too soon and too often. It's easier to do too much and then back off than not do enough and not know how far you can go. So by closing too soon and too often, you develop a closing instinct. Have you ever sat in a room, let's say reading, the door is shut behind you and somebody opens the door, you don't see it, but you feel the atmospheric pressure change?
Yes.
Okay. When you decide to buy, I feel literally an atmospheric pressure change. So when I say, well, based on what we've discussed, Rosalind, here's what I suggest we do, fill in the blank. Fair enough. I know the answer. I wouldn't have asked you.
Yes, yes. And that comes from all of the experience and the pain of going through those thousands and thousands
Yeah.
of, of sales presentations to be able to develop that skill. And I think maybe there are times when I'm hearing what you just heard from your salesperson friend that, how do you develop the confidence? I think the confidence is developed like what you did. You took the hard road.
Mhm.
You went through the thousands. You began to get an instinct for this and got better, saw what worked and what didn't. That's just the answer, I think, to
Yeah.
being good in anything.
Sure. Practice, practice, practice. Have a coach. I was president of the company rather quickly, but because it was the place to be in those days. If you were in commission selling, you either worked with us, for us, or plotting and scheming how to join us.
Mm.
Therefore, J. Douglas Edwards, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, Dr. Napoleon Hill, Og Mandino, all of those people, I think I sent you a list of some of the more interesting ones.
Sure.
All of those people were around us. So all I had to do, I was 25 years old by the time I became president of the cosmetic company. All I had to do really was shut up and listen. There was pure genius all around me. I've had meetings in my office. I had a big conference table, and uh, if it was full, there were about 15 people sitting around it counting me. I can show you pictures of, you would know every one of the 15 people. They were all famous. A couple of them became infamous, but they were all famous for their skill. And they were just on. Somebody asked me one time, how did you meet Og Mandino? I said, the first time I went to the bathroom, came out of my office, went down the hall, and I was heading to the men's room, and he was standing there. And I said, you look familiar. I'm Og Mandino. I said, I'm Ben Gay. Oh, yes, I was told I'd meet you today, and so on. So that's how I met some of the great and famous. I got around where they are. It's like my brother-in-law said, he's an outdoorsman type guy. He thinks I'm a city boy wimp, but he marches through the bushes and shoots deer and so on. And I said, how do you catch so many trout? He said, I'm going to tell you a secret I never tell anybody. I said, what's that? He said, I go to the trout streams where they hang out. So
Yes.
that makes sense if you think about it. Go where they are. Well, I happened to luck out and do well and rise to the top where they were. And then I listened. I spent a lot of
It's,
time
it's, it's,
listening.
it, it's fascinating. Tell me a little bit about, I want to hear about Zig Ziglar. Tell me a story about him.
Well, Zig was 18 years older than I was. He was in the Navy the day I was born. Most of my mentors averaged out about 12 years older, so he was older than that, but he was still a young man. I joined at 23, 33, 40, so he was in his early 40s when I met him, because we each answered the same ad in the same newspaper on the same day and went to this meeting. We thought it was an interview. It turned out it was an opportunity meeting, but went to this meeting, and that's where our friendship started. He laughed at my name. I asked him what his was. Ben Gay is funny. Zig Ziglar, I think, is just as funny. So we started off on that premise. And then I had to learn how to sell. Zig was a salesman based on his personality. He would have made a good stand-up comedian as a lounge act. He was just a funny, likable guy. And when he stood on stage, he did a lot of that, you say this, they say this, you say this, you say that, as training. But I watched him work up close and personal. He didn't do that. He sold Zig Ziglar. And you just wanted to be around him and be his friend. And if you had to join a company or buy a product to make that happen, you did it. So it was what I call being a sales infiltrator. Zig was inside your line of defense before you knew he'd started. And then he used to tell a story about the pump handles. I don't know if you remember that or not, but a big old water pump, that you do this to make it work out on the farm somewhere. And he would tell the story, if you got to keep pumping. If you don't, the water goes back down in the well, maybe right before it started coming out, and so on. So persistence. Well, he had a prop. It was an old water pump handle. And just to be around him, I carried that stupid pump into probably 100 meetings, 50 for sure, probably 100 meetings. And then I encouraged him to get an aluminum one because my back has never been the best. And I couldn't carry that thing around. I was losing my enthusiasm for carrying it around. Here's a cute Zig story. Zig was always talking about this old boy down home, in one of his stories, this old boy down home, Buster Lewis was his name, and so-and-so, and he would tell the story. I knew his stories. I used to mouth corrections at him. I knew his stories. It's like going to see a rock and roll band who plays music from your teenage years, and they change it up because they're tired of playing the same thing over and over again, and you get aggravated. Well, Zig changed up a story. I go, no. Trying to get him to tell it the way he was supposed to. So one day he told a story about this old boy down home who said this and did this and so on. And I'd never heard the story before, nor did he use a name. So as we're leaving the meeting, I said, Zig, new story. I really liked it, but you didn't give his name. And he smiled and he said, I haven't gotten that far yet. He had made up the story to prove a sales thing. And because he maybe thought it up that morning. Because of that, he had not yet given the good old boy a name. The next time I heard it, he had a name.
Love it.
But
Love it.
He was just marvelous. I don't know if you can hear that, but a timer just went off, reminded me of something.
Let me ask you about Napoleon Hill. I've read his book, Think and Go Rich. Tell me a little bit about him.
Wonderful man. This is a signed copy of Think and Grow Rich from 1945. I was 3 years old when he signed this one. Great story about this particular one. He signed it to a Mrs. Grace Dixon. Now, I've been in the book selling business a long time. I know that many of the Closers Part 1, we sold 10.5 million copies when we quit counting 25 years ago. So I know a little bit about the book business. I also know if I go into somebody's office, see one of my books on the shelf and pick it up, frequently when I open it, I'm the first person who's ever opened the book. The spine has not been cracked. One day we're walking through the house and my wife, not Gigi, my first wife who's passed away now, had a copy of this book lying on the coffee table. Like we always left Think and Grow Rich lying around. She knew he was coming. So I said, oh, look, Dr. Hill, a copy of Think and Grow Rich. And he smiled. He understood the game. And I said, how does it feel to have written? They used to say that the Bible was number one, Think and Grow Rich was number two. Don't know if that's true, but he sold a bunch of them. And I said, how's it feel to have written one of the best-selling books on earth? He said, best-selling, least read, which goes back to this particular copy. It was given to me by a friend who knew of my work with Dr. Hill. She bought it at a garage sale for 50 cents. Notice that the front is pretty red. The back is pretty red. The spine, is bleached out. Here's why. I know the story. I don't know Grace Dixon, but I know what happened. She went to some event to see Dr. Hill. She listened to him. He made an altar call, come buy the book, I'll sign it at the back of the room. She stood in that line, bought the book. Then she stood in the line to get it signed, and he signed it. When my friend gave me this book, I went to open it. It has never been opened except far enough for him to sign the front page. The rest of it has never been opened, and I'm not going to be the one that cracks the spine. It's too good a story. So in 1945, Mrs. Grace Dixon bought this book, took it home, got it signed, took it home, probably showed it to a friend or two, and then stuck it in the bookcase where the sun bleached it out for the next 75 years. That's what happens to most books. There's a conversation I'm participating in right now with a wonderful gentleman who is a follower of Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn always said, have a library. Well, I started seeing this string of comments, and they were confusing buying books with reading books. I recently, a few years ago, realized my count of books had gotten up to about 5,000, the vast majority of which I was never going to open again. So I started giving them to somebody who might read them, 10 here, 5 there, a pile to the library, and so on, because I thought somebody ought to have a shot at reading it. Well, there was this uproar. How can you give away books? Because what they're building is monuments to themselves. Look how smart I am. Look at all these books I have. And then in their comments, I discovered what they were doing is probably buying 48 inches of green books because they didn't have enough green in their bookcase, 12 inches of blue, whatever. They confused buying and acquiring with reading. Of the 5,000 books I gave away, I started collecting them about 55 years ago. I had at least opened and attempted to read every book in the collection. Some books, I used to, if I'm going to start a book, I'm going to finish it. Well, a lot of books aren't worth finishing. So, but I at least opened every one of those 5,000 books and got deep enough into it to get excited and finish it. I can tell the ones I read because highlighted and marked up and everything. And in some cases, I thought this is a total waste of time. And it was still in the bookcase, but I didn't claim to have read it. So to your viewers, reading is crucial. I've never talked to a leader, a millionaire, a few billionaires that I know. All of them are readers, but they're not just buyers of books. You can't be like Mrs. Grace Dixon. Unfortunately, she was in the presence of Dr. Hill, listened to his story, had an opportunity to read his book, and got nothing from the experience.
That's really unfortunate.
Yeah,
but you're
Dr.
absolutely
Hill,
right.
Dr. Hill sat at the end of my conference table whenever he was in town, and we talked on the phone a lot. And I'd visit him back I'd fly into Columbia, South Carolina, to spend time with him, and I sopped up what he had to teach me. Most of what he taught me is in Think and Grow Rich. I could have bought the book. But sometimes we become Mrs. Grace Dixons. We buy the book, we go through the motion, and nothing happens because you didn't avail yourself of the information. Dr. Hill was not a great speaker. His message was strong, but even when he was younger, he talked like a little old man. And then as time marched on, not only did he talk like a little old man, he got sort of crotchety. He didn't give me long. A friend of mine said to me, now, when you were with Dr. Hill, did he give you assignments? I said, no. He sat at the end of the table until everybody else had left the room. When I heard click of my door, I knew that if he had anything to say, this is when I was going to hear it. And he would say something like, Ben, that's stupid. Or, and so I used to look for that stupid in Think and Grow Rich. I thought maybe there was a chapter on it. But
wow.
he was a very simple guy, except when he picked up a pen and started writing. Then he got very profound.
That's amazing. That's amazing. We're running out of time. I want to ask you one last question about sales. Now, you talk about scripts a lot being very, very important. What are the different types of scripts, the different types that you think a salesperson should write?
Well, first of all, before we get in the running battle that salespeople try and give me, I don't believe in scripts. Well, if you've been in sales over 30 days, you're on a script. You've started saying the same thing over and over and over again. So we're not, I won't waste any time discussing whether people are on scripts or not. They are. What they ought to be on is a good script that has been tested and proven over time. We got Holiday Magic from a small, struggling company up to $1 million a day in cash coming in the door in 1967 dollars. That's about $3.5 billion today. We always had a good product. The day Bill Patrick opened the company, we had a good product. He bought a proven product line from a company who hadn't done well, put his marketing plan on it, and off we went. And then I added the scripts, the good ones, and sales just took off because scripts enable you to duplicate rather than just Bill Patrick running around telling people about the cosmetic line he bought. Rather quickly, we had 1,000 people doing that, then 300,000, and then worldwide and in the various subsidiaries, all of which used the same exact marketing plan, the product change. We had 1 million people at any given time out saying exactly the same thing. And so scripting was the secret. There's a lot of good cosmetic lines, a lot of good marketing plans, a lot of ways to do everything. But if you can't have lots of people explaining it effectively to lots of people, you're out of luck. I was talking to a guy yesterday, Rosalind, who I met early in my career. I'm 50 plus years ago. A friend of mine called me and said, I have a meeting set up for 500 people in Jackson, Mississippi. Would you drive over from Atlanta and do it? And I said, sure. He was one of my mentors, Merle Frazier, great guy. So Jimmy Rucker, greatest salesman ever lived, and I jumped in our car and drove to Jackson, Mississippi. I go down through a rainstorm. We stopped and helped people at a traffic accident where people were hurt. We finally made it there on time. I'm down. It's a basketball gymnasium set up for 500 people. I said, I'll run downstairs and get as dry as I can. And I'm down in the locker room getting dressed. And Rucker came down. Jimmy Rucker came down. And I said, are they ready? He said, he's ready. I said, no. I said, are they ready? Are the 500 people here? He said, Ben, I already told you, he's ready. When I went upstairs, there was 499 empty seats, and Nolan Bush was his name, sitting in the front row all by his lonesome. And I said, where's everybody else? He said, I'm the only one who came through the rain, I guess. I said, I introduced myself. I said, Nolan, I want to apologize. I only know one way to present this to you. And it wasn't designed for one-on-one. It was designed for 1 on 200 or 500 or whatever. Do you mind if I give you the standard presentation? Scripted is what we're talking about. He said, no, go ahead. So I looked at Nolan Bush in a sea of empty chairs and said, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ben Gay. I'm a general distributor with Holiday Magic. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's special meeting. Then went on, including a short film for 47 minutes, word for word. And he signed up and so on. Later, years later, I'm running a different company. I didn't recognize him. I'm up in front of the room. The goal is to get $27,625.13 out of each one of them. There's a reason for that number, but anyway, out of each one of them. And I said, I was introduced and I said, all right, over the next 10 days, we're going to do so-and-so. And this hand goes up. He says, hi, you don't recognize or remember me, but here's my check for $24,625.13. So cashier's check. Hand it to me. He said, now, I'm Nolan Bush. And 50 years ago or whatever it was in Jackson, Mississippi, one night, you came through a storm from God and delivered your presentation word for word, although I was the only one that was there. And I said, I remember, Nolan. Yes, I do remember. I've told the story. And he said, well, the reason I'm giving you this check for $24,625.13 before I know what you're going to say or really what the product is. He turned to the group and he said, I want you to know that this man will do what he tells you to do. There wasn't a penny in it for him. He did it for a friend. He got no money then or now or anything. But I'm putting this up because he tells the truth. And when he tells you to learn the script that I'm sure he's going to give us, learn the script. And he sat down.
Powerful
And then
testimonial.
yeah, sometimes the close takes a while. That one took about 50 years, but it worked. And then when I started the National Communication Center and began the 800 call center industry, I discovered within a day or two that we had a problem with everybody freelancing around the room. I thought, hello, thank you for calling, and then figure out what they wanted, because everybody used the same phone number. We time shared an 800 number. I still have it. 800-824-7888 became one of the busiest phone lines in the world. We went from no calls the first day or two to 50 to 60,000 calls when I left the business every day. And the trick was everybody was scripted. If you were a client, you put an operator number at the bottom of your ad, dial 800, blah, 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 operator number. Well, that told us why you were calling, what company's ad you saw, and so on. So we scripted, answered the phone. Thank you very much for calling. How may I help you? Then you said operator 625. Back then, before a computer on every desk, she had like a New York telephone directory in front of her up on a stand, or a Sears Roebuck catalog. She flipped to 625 and said, "This is operator 625 with blah, blah, blah," and read the script down through the close. 50 to 60,000 calls a day. Every single one of them answered word for word. So
So let me just get this straight, Ben. So just to pull this out, so there are different kinds of scripts. So
sure.
if I'm on the phone with a client, there's that, or whatever medium I'm using, there's that phone script or email script. Or when you're on stage talking, we think we're giving a presentation, but that's really, the presentation is a script.
Sure.
You're persuading.
You ever been to a play or a movie, or
Absolutely,
watched a
that's a special
television
script.
or heard a group sing?
Absolutely. I think we need to think like that.
The Mormon Tabernacle Choir is on a script. I mean, everybody who knows they're doing is on some sort of script. I know we're short on time, but let me give you a quick story. He just died. He's been on my mind. Hal Holbrook did Mark Twain for over 50 years, traveling around. Well, here's what he did, because people say, well, you can't go from A to Z, word for word, the same way every time with everybody. True. There are script chunks. When I'm talking about the engine in a Ford, whatever, here's what I say about the engine. If you say, but I want to see what's in the trunk, then I go to the trunk script. I don't keep talking about the engine, so I've changed. Well, Hal Holbrook did Mark Twain. He had 9.5 hours of material, word for word, memorized. He walked on stage and he always used the same short opening, funny story, always. And then he listened to the audience's reaction. And that determined what the next story you heard was. But when you heard it, it was word for word, memorized, pulled from his 9.5 hour vault. And he swore that he never, a 2 hour presentation minus an intermission. So he was probably talking for an hour and 45 minutes every time. He said he never gave the same presentation twice. Everything he said was word for word Mark Twain, but based on what you just said, or how you laughed. I walk on stage. I have an seminar introduction. I think you have a copy of it. When done properly, they always stand and applaud. As soon as they start, because it's scripted. I've tested that. Well, I'll just wing it. No, you won't. You'll read this script, or I won't. When you say, and here he has been gay, I won't come on. You will have read it or not. So usually that shapes them up. Standing ovation as they start to sit down. Some are already seated, the worst of them about 3/4 seated. I say, all right, let's get this Ben Gay thing out of the way, because everybody thinks I have a funny name. Well, that's my Mark Twain opening joke. Based on how they react to that, because I know how they're supposed to react to it, determines the story or the example I give you next. But whatever story example I give you is word for word the way I gave it in the previous 5,000 presentations I've given.
Wow, that's amazing. And what control you have over being persuasive. I think when you do that, that's an awful amount of work, but it's very powerful to be able
Mhm.
to pull and be prepared no matter what the scenario is because you put that much work into the presentation.
And
So
I've done it so many times.
if somebody wants to get in contact with you, do you coach um, students, sales coaching?
Sure. Here's what you do. I ought to have the email address on here. I don't. I have a high-powered, highly technical card that I typed up and stuck on the back of a shipping box, I think. Anyway, go to my website, www.bfg3.com, and
Nice.
there's contact information there. If you want to send me an email, it'll tell you what it is. I won't make you go through it now. If you'd like to look at the materials we sell, the Closer series is the most popular, most powerful, best-selling series of books ever written on selling. And you go to stores.ebay.com/Ronzoni books, RONZONE books. And there they offer special pricing and free shipping. And
Nice.
there you can start into the Closer series. I hate to be so commercial, but you ask.
Oh, definitely. We always want to
Yeah,
highlight our members. Well, I want to thank you for being here. You know, you keep gracing us with all your vast knowledge. I love your storytelling. You know, it's just,
thank you.
we could go on for hours. And we will. We'll come back another time. But until next time, everyone, I thank you for being here. I know that you've come walking away with some jewels as usual. Until next time, peace and blessings, everyone. Take care.
Goodbye.